Ethereum smart contracts, huh? It feels like everyone's talking about them, but like with anything new in tech, sometimes the hype gets ahead of, actually understanding what it is.
Yeah, I think that's true. To really get the potential, you got to go deeper than just the buzzwords. Got to understand what's at the core of it all.
And that's what we're doing here. We're diving deep today, and we've got a great guide to help us out. We're looking at Ethereum Smart Contract Development by Mayukh Mukhopadhyay.
Right off the bat, the author uses this analogy, compares blockchain to a journey.
Right.
And just like if you were packing for any big trip, got to make sure you have the right gear. And in this case, that gear is knowledge.
I like that. The analogy works for me. But before we start, packing every little technical detail, can you give me the big picture? Why all the excitement around blockchain? What's so revolutionary about it?
I think the revolutionary part is really the decentralization of it all. You see, so many traditional systems, they rely on this central authority, a bank, the government, a big tech company, right? Blockchain flips that on its head. It takes information, and instead of one source, it spreads it out across this whole network of computers. That's what's called a distributed system, and it makes it incredibly secure, very transparent.
So instead of one entity controlling it all, it's more like a collective effort.
Exactly. And that's where cryptography comes in. The book calls this out as the second piece of gear for a blockchain journey. It's a pretty complex thing, but basically, it acts like this sophisticated digital signature. It validates every single transaction, making sure only the right people access the data.
That makes sense. So we've got the secure system, transparent too, keeps track of information, verifies it, the whole 9 yards. But this book, it zeroes in on Ethereum smart contracts. Where do those fit into this whole blockchain picture?
That's where things get really interesting. Bitcoin, that was the first time we saw blockchain used. But Ethereum, it took things a step further. It lets developers build these decentralized applications, and they live right on top of the Ethereum blockchain.
Decentralized applications, meaning they're not controlled by a single company, like your Googles, your Apples, none of that.
Exactly. And those applications, they're powered by these things called smart contracts. Think of them like self-executing agreements, but written in code. So you can automate all these complex transactions, all kinds of processes, without needing a middleman at all.
Okay, I'm starting to see why everyone's excited. This has the potential to change so many industries. But I have to admit, the idea of smart contracts and these decentralized apps, it's still a bit abstract. Can we make it more concrete?
For sure. The book actually dives into the anatomy of a Bitcoin block, and it uses that as a way to show the fundamental building blocks of, any blockchain. And while we're using Bitcoin as the example, Ethereum's blocks, they share very similar principles.
Let's talk about those blocks. The book uses the phrase, probe into the internal logical architecture. Sounds kind of intimidating, like we're about to do some digital surgery or something.
No scalpels needed here, don't worry. Just imagine a block as a digital container. This container holds a whole bunch of transactions, like a record of who sent Bitcoin to whom and how much. Each block, it also has what's called a timestamp. It's like having a digital notary there, verifying exactly when each transaction happened.
So each block is like a chapter in this ongoing story of the blockchain. Every single transaction gets recorded. That must be a ton of data to keep track of. How do they keep it all organized and, more importantly, secure?
That's where things get really clever. Every single block is linked to the one before it using something called a hash function. Think of it like a unique fingerprint, and it's generated from the data within that block.
Okay, so each block has this fingerprint that connects it back to the one before it. How does that guarantee security, though?
Well, let's say someone tries to tamper with a block's information.
Yeah.
Even the smallest change, it completely changes that block's hash, that fingerprint. And because each block's fingerprint is linked to the one before it, any change just screams, hey, something's wrong here. It's like a tamper-proof seal on every chapter of our blockchain story.
So you can't go back and change anything without everyone knowing. That really drives home this whole thing about blockchain's immutability, which I hear all the time.
It's one of the core principles that make blockchain so secure. And it's that principle that allows everyone to trust that the data on a blockchain is accurate, even though it's spread out across a network.
That's incredible. Okay, so we have these blocks all chained together, each with a unique fingerprint, make sure the entire system's got integrity. What happens next? How do these blocks actually get added to the chain?
That's where mining comes in. It's a really crucial part of how blockchains stay secure and how they grow.
All right, let's unpack mining then. But before we do, I'm curious about this other term the book mentioned, forking. It almost sounds ominous, like the blockchain splitting in two or something.
It's not quite as dramatic as it sounds, but forking is important to understand, especially as we dig deeper into Ethereum and how it's evolved.
Yeah.
So mining, basically it's this race, right? A race to solve really, really complex math problems.
Okay.
Like picture a global network of computers. They're all competing, trying to solve this puzzle, and whoever gets there first cracks the code, they win the right to add the next block onto the chain.
So it is kind of like a digital gold rush then. These miners, using their computer power to unearth the next block, get the rewards.
That's a great way to put it. And yeah, those rewards, they come in cryptocurrency. For Bitcoin, it's Bitcoin, obviously. For Ethereum, it's Ether. And that incentive system, that's what keeps people mining. And that, in turn, keeps the blockchain secure, keeps it all running.
It all ties together. It's amazing. But you mentioned forking earlier. What does that even mean in this context?
All right, so picture our blockchain journey, right? We're going along, and then, bam, we hit a fork in the road.
Okay.
Sometimes the community behind a blockchain, they might disagree on which way to go next.
Okay.
Could be different ideas about how the tech should evolve, or maybe a software upgrade comes along. Not everyone's on board.
So a split in the road, and then the blockchain, it goes two different ways. Does that mean there are now two versions of the same blockchain?
You got it. And depending on what's going on, those two paths, they might merge back together eventually, or they could keep going their separate ways, end up with two totally distinct blockchains.
Wow, that's wild. These forks, it sounds like they could really change how a blockchain develops. The book, it seems especially interested in where Ethereum fits into all of this whole technology hype cycle you mentioned before. Can we dig into that a little more?
Yeah, the hype cycle, it's a fascinating thing to watch. It's this pattern you see with new tech. Excitement, disillusionment, and then finally things settle down. Think about something like artificial intelligence, right?
Sure.
Huge hype. Then you have these AI winters. Progress just seemed to stop. It's happened over and over.
So every big tech breakthrough, it goes through these growing pains. What about Ethereum then? Where are we on the roller coaster right now?
Well, Ethereum, it burst onto the scene with all these promises. Decentralized finance, supply chains, you name it. It definitely rode that wave of hype, got developers and investors all fired up.
And has it lived up to it all? Or have we hit that Ethereum winter?
It's not so black and white. That initial buzz, it's quieted down some, but Ethereum itself, it's gotten more mature. We're seeing real-world uses popping up now, all sorts of industries.
The book mentioned that, how these Ethereum smart contracts could totally change how businesses manage supply chains. Even talked about potential savings in the millions. That's massive.
It's huge. And that's just one example. Then you've got DeFi, decentralized finance, another area where Ethereum's making big moves. You can create financial applications that are totally transparent, no need for banks or any of those traditional middlemen.
DeFi, right. That actually reminds me of something else from the book that I found really interesting. It talked about how Ethereum lets developers create those smart contracts, the self-executing agreements we talked about. Can you walk me through how those actually work?
At its core, it's all about automating trust. Imagine we're making a bet on a basketball game.
Okay.
Instead of just like hoping we each pay up, we could write a smart contract on the Ethereum blockchain.
So we put the terms of our bet into this contract. But how do we guarantee the loser actually pays up?
That's the beauty of it. Within the code, we define what winning and losing looks like. Then, game's over, smart contract automatically checks the result, gets it from a trusted source, and boom, it handles the money transfer right then and there, no arguments needed.
So it's like this incorruptible digital referee, right? Make sure everything's fair in our bet, no need to get involved ourselves. I can see how this could change everything, how we do agreements, transactions, the whole shebang.
It's all about moving that trust, not from person to person or even institution to institution, but putting it into the code itself. The beauty is, smart contracts, they just do their thing automatically, no bias, soon as those conditions are met.
The book talked about supply chain management, how this could be huge for that. Instead of all the paperwork, needing middlemen, you can track everything on the blockchain, verify it too, right?
Exactly. Imagine you could trace your coffee beans, know exactly what farm they came from, or an order you placed online, see where it is every step of the way, all that managed with smart contracts.
Total transparency for processes that used to be, well, kind of shady sometimes. This is all amazing, but there's got to be a downside, right? The book mentioned some challenges with decentralized systems.
Right. Important to remember, no tech is perfect. Ethereum, blockchain in general, it's still early days. Scalability, that's a big one. Can these systems handle it when you've got tons of people using them, tons of transactions happening.
Like trying to fit a whole city's worth of traffic onto one road. Decentralization is great, but can it handle the volume?
That's something developers are tackling right now. Then you've got the whole regulation side of things. How do you keep that decentralized spirit, but also make sure consumers are protected, prevent people from using it for the wrong reasons? Lots of big questions still to be figured out.
Sounds like our blockchain journey, understanding all of this. Ethereum, it doesn't end here. There's a lot more to explore.
Absolutely. And that's what's so exciting about it. This technology, it has the power to reshape industries, change how we interact, how we do business, even challenge how we think about trust and value itself.
Well, this deep dive has been incredible. We went from all that hype around blockchain to really getting into how it works, even got a glimpse of what Ethereum smart contracts could do, how they might revolutionize business and agreements.
And this is just the beginning.
Yeah.
The book we looked at today, it's a great starting point. I encourage everyone, dive in deeper, see what Ethereum's all about, what you can do with it.
So to our listeners, as you continue your own journey into this world, here's something to think about. What will you build? What will you change? What will you contribute to this exciting new frontier? Until next time, happy exploring.